A week before the wedding, my fiancé's rich parents threw a prenup in my face, smirking like they'd already won. But they didn't know I owned a $100 million company, had my own lawyer, and a plan that would wipe those smug smiles away. The evening light spilling through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Caldwell estate made everything look deceptively gentle, soft, golden, almost holy. But the room felt cold. The kind of cold that lives beneath polished marble and old money. I sat at the long dining table, hands folded neatly in my lap, trying to steady my breath as Richard and Victoria Caldwell watched me with expressions carved from stone. Ethan sat beside me, close enough that I could feel the faint warmth of his arm, but far enough that I knew I was alone in whatever was about to happen. Then it came, a thick, gold-rimmed folder sliding across the table and landing in front of me with a dull, unforgiving thud. The sound cracked through the silence. I didn't need to open it to understand. Victoria leaned back in her chair, her diamond bracelet catching the light as if mocking the simplicity of the moment. "It's just a formality to protect the family assets, dear. I'm sure you understand." Her voice was velvet stretched over steel. I stared at the folder for a beat, maybe two, then lifted my eyes to meet hers. She held my gaze with a kind of polite cruelty, a smile that didn't dare touch her eyes. Richard didn't bother pretending. His smirk said, "Everything we know who you are, what you're after, and you're not getting it." But what hurt wasn't them. It was Ethan. I felt his hand slide under the table and gently squeeze mine. A silent plea, a fragile attempt at comfort, or maybe cowardice wrapped in affection. "Don't make this into a big deal," he whispered, barely moving his lips. His voice trembled. He didn't want a scene. He didn't want conflict. He didn't want to upset the two people sitting across from us, the two people who had controlled every chapter of his life so far. I turned to look at him, really look at him. This man I had shared late-night tacos and whispered dreams with. This man who once held my face in his hands and said, "You're my home." But in this moment, he wouldn't even lift his eyes to meet mine. His head bowed slightly, as if he were a child waiting for permission to speak. His silence sliced deeper than the prenup ever could. I pressed my lips together, swallowing the heaviness forming in my chest, and slowly opened the folder. My name appeared on the first page, printed neatly above a series of clauses that stripped me of every right a future spouse could reasonably expect. No marital property, no shared assets, no claim to anything I helped build, contribute, or sacrifice for. If the marriage ended, I would walk away with nothing, as if I had arrived with nothing. Victoria tapped the table lightly with her manicured nails. "We hired the best attorneys in the state to draft this. It's for everyone's protection." I lifted my eyes again. "Everyone's?" She smiled wider. "Well, you know. Family." I let the word sink in. Family. The one thing I had wanted my entire life. The one thing I thought I had finally found in Ethan. The irony of it scraped against my ribs. I closed the folder quietly, careful not to let the edges shake in my hands. Ethan's thumb rubbed small circles on my palm, anxious, apologetic. "We can talk about it later," he murmured. "They're just being cautious." And that was when something inside me tilted. Because caution was not what I saw in their eyes. What I saw was certainty. Certainty that I would comply. Certainty that I would fold. Certainty that I should feel grateful just to be sitting at their table. And the worst part? They believed Ethan would make sure of it. My heart beat slow and heavy, each pulse dragging through my chest like it weighed a pound. "He loves me," I told myself. "He does." But love without courage, what was it worth? The room felt smaller, tighter, as if the walls themselves were listening. I pushed my chair back, the legs scraping softly across the polished floor. "I need some time to think," I said quietly. No anger. No raised voice. Just a calm so sharp it could cut glass. Richard frowned as if I had broken a rule he expected me to follow. Victoria's smile faltered, the first crack in her perfect facade. Ethan's hand slipped from mine as if he didn't know whether to stop me or let me go. "Ava, wait," he whispered, but the words died in his throat. I picked up my coat draped over the back of the chair, slipping it around my shoulders with steady hands. When I looked at Ethan one last time, his eyes were shining with something like fear or regret, but he still didn't stand. He didn't reach for me. He didn't defend me. And in that moment, something inside me quietly broke. Sometimes, I realized, silence hurts more than betrayal. I walked toward the door, the air thick, my footsteps echoing through the hall lined with family portraits, generations of Caldwells staring down at me like judges in a courtroom I never chose to enter. Outside, the sky had darkened, clouds gathering over the coastline. A cold wind swept across the driveway as I stepped out. Then the first drop of rain hit my cheek. Without looking back, I walked into the storm. The prenup folder remained on the table inside, but the real damage had already been done. And none of them, not even Ethan, seemed to understand that the moment I stood up from that table, something fundamental had shifted. I slid into my car, hands trembling now that no one could see them, and as rain streaked across the windshield in heavy, uneven lines, one thought echoed through my mind. If love requires me to shrink myself, then maybe it isn't love at all. The rain didn't stop that night. It followed me home like an echo of everything I couldn't bring myself to say. As I sat in my dimly lit apartment, watching the storm blur the city lights, memories of how it all began drifted back uninvited, bittersweet, and impossibly gentle compared to what had just happened. I met Ethan 3 years ago, long before prenups and cold marble tables and the kind of silence that tears something inside you. It was at a startup conference in San Francisco, the kind filled with people trying too hard to sound important and failing spectacularly. I was there to speak on a panel about user-focused AI, hiding behind the anonymity I had so carefully built. No one there knew who I truly was, just another promising founder among many. Ethan wasn't even supposed to be at that event. He told me later he had slipped in to avoid a family dinner his mother had arranged with a business partner's daughter. When he sank into the empty seat beside me during the keynote, he looked like a man trying to escape the weight of his own life. Our first conversation started with something small. He complimented the notebook I was sketching ideas in, but it didn't feel forced. He spoke to me as if he genuinely cared to hear the answer, not as if he were waiting for his turn to talk. That alone made him different from half the people in that room. I still remember the sincerity in his voice when he said, "I like how your mind works." Most people noticed everything superficial about me: my age, my background, my calm. Ethan noticed the way I thought. And it disarmed me more than I wanted to admit. Later that afternoon, he confessed something quietly, almost shyly. My parents, they don't really approve of anything I choose on my own. He laughed like he was used to the humiliation. Schools, jobs, friends, everything had to be curated. I felt something in my chest soften. Maybe because I knew what it felt like to navigate life without a safety net, without belonging. Maybe because, for once, someone else was the vulnerable one in the conversation. Our story didn't ignite with fireworks. It bloomed slowly, gently. He asked me out for coffee a week later, a hole-in-the-wall cafe in Pacific Heights where the barista knew everyone by name. Ethan wasn't flashy then. He was warm. Quiet. He asked questions that made me feel seen, not evaluated. That became our ritual. Late-night coffee runs after long workdays, wandering through the marina as he told me stories about the pressure of being a Caldwell, stories about expectations he never asked for, responsibilities he never wanted. He spoke of his mother's control with a mixture of fear and resignation, and of his father's bluntness with a child's instinctive desire to please. I should have seen the warning signs then. But in those moments, walking beside him under streetlights, hands brushing gently as if we were afraid to hold too much, he felt human. He felt honest, and I was so starved for something real. Our relationship unfurled in places that felt stolen from a postcard. Weekend drives down Highway 1, picnics in Carmel by the sea where he read aloud lines from books he loved, his voice soft over the sound of waves. Sunset dinners on rooftops where he pulled me close and promised, "I'm not like them. I want something different." There were nights he fell asleep on my couch, head resting in my lap, whispering dreams he didn't tell anyone else. And somewhere between those slow, tender moments, I let myself believe him. I let myself believe that love, quiet, gentle love, could be enough to rewrite someone's fears. But love doesn't erase conditioning, no matter how much we wish it could. The first time I saw Ethan shift was during a dinner with his parents, months into our relationship. Victoria arrived wearing a gown that glittered like frost and spoke to me as if I were a kindly stranger she'd decided to tolerate. Richard asked Ethan questions he didn't actually want answered, the way a general might interrogate a soldier. And Ethan folded instantly, shoulders tightening, voice softening, every opinion replaced with a version more acceptable. He barely spoke to me the entire evening. I tried to rationalize it. Everyone behaves differently around their parents. But as weeks turned into months, the pattern deepened. With me, he was the man I fell in love with, warm, thoughtful, brave, in small ways. With them, he became someone else entirely, muted, obedient, afraid to breathe too loudly. It didn't happen all at once. It was slow erosion. A hesitation here, a nervous glance there, apologizing for things he didn't do, pretending to agree with opinions he despised, canceling plans with me when his mother insisted on a family event. I kept telling myself he just needed time, space, encouragement, that if love could be a refuge, maybe I could be his. But watching him shrink whenever they entered the room made something unsettled flutter at the edges of my heart, a small whisper telling me that this weakness, this fear, might someday reach us too. He loved me. I never doubted that. But love without backbone is like a door with no hinges. It looks solid until the first strong wind hits. And I think, somewhere deep down, I always knew. I just didn't want to believe it. As the storm outside my window rumbled softly, I closed my eyes. The memory of Ethan's trembling hand beneath the Caldwell dining table replayed in my mind. The prenup, the silence. The moment he didn't choose me. I used to believe love could heal fear, I whispered into the empty room. But some people fear more deeply than they love, and maybe that was the beginning of the end, even if neither of us saw it coming at the time. 2 months before the wedding, when excitement should have been coloring every corner of my life, the first fracture appeared, small, almost invisible, but sharp enough to make my heart flinch. It began with a phone call on a quiet Tuesday morning. I was reviewing floral arrangements when my wedding planner, Melissa, called with a strained politeness I rarely heard from her. Not even partially. His cars? Leased under the foundation's corporate fleet. His investment accounts? Managed and controlled by his parents' financial team. Even the ring he gave me, beautiful, thoughtful, chosen with real love, had been insured under Victoria's name. I wasn't angry at him. That was the worst part. I was heartbroken for him. When I confronted him gently, showing him what I'd found, he froze. "Ethan, why isn't anything in your name?" He swallowed hard, eyes dropping. "It's complicated. Explain it to me," I urged. He rubbed the back of his neck, a nervous habit I'd seen 100 times. "My parents. They've always handled things. For tax purposes. For liability reasons. It's just easier. But nothing is actually yours," I said quietly. "That's not easy, Ethan. That's control." He winced. "It won't be like that forever," he whispered. "After the wedding, they'll transfer some properties into my name. That's how it works." "After the wedding," I repeated, tasting the implication like something bitter spreading across my tongue. "So, I marry you first, and then they decide what you get?" He didn't deny it. He didn't say a word. And suddenly I felt like I had stepped into someone else's life by mistake, a life I didn't understand, one that didn't understand me. Whose wedding is this? Whose future is this? I had dreamed of a partnership. A marriage of equals. But what was I marrying into? A family or a monarchy? Ethan reached for my hand then, trying to gather the pieces before they fell. "Ava, please. Don't let this get between us. I love you." I looked at him, really looked at him, the man who had once felt like home. I know you love me, I said gently. But love can't stand on legs that won't walk. He flinched at that, because he knew exactly what I meant. His silence didn't come from malice. It came from fear. A lifetime of it. And as I sat there watching him struggle to find words he would never say, a quiet realization settled into my bones. He loves me, but not enough to face them. And sometimes, that truth, soft, painful, unchangeable, is the one that breaks you the most. The night after I discovered the truth about Ethan's family holdings, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake in the quiet dark of my apartment, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional whisper of passing cars. It felt surreal, how one discovery could shift the entire weight of a relationship. I wasn't angry at Ethan. Not yet. But I was shaken. Shaken by how completely his life belonged to everyone but him. Shaken by the fact that I'd been preparing to join a world built on chains disguised as tradition. And as I stared at the ceiling, letting the truth settle like dust around me, another truth rose in its place, one I had buried so deep I often forgot it existed. The truth of who I really was before love distracted me from myself. Years ago, long before wedding planners and prenups and the chilling elegance of the Caldwell estate, I was just a girl working 12-hour days in a cramped co-working space, eating instant noodles between coding sprints and dreaming about building something of my own. Neurocore began in the corner of a public library, scribbled in a notebook so worn the spine barely held together. I didn't have funding or a network or a last name that opened doors. I only had an idea, desperation, and a quiet rage at the world for underestimating people like me. Every investor who dismissed me, "You're too young, AI logistics is too competitive. Do you even have a technical background?" added fuel to the fire. Every failure made me sharper. And by the time my algorithm for predictive freight mapping caught the attention of a major venture firm, I had already learned the most important lesson of my life. The less people know about your power, the harder it is for them to control it. I built Neurocore quietly, methodically, like a fortress only I knew how to navigate. When the acquisition offer came in at just under $100 million, I accepted it without celebration. I didn't buy a penthouse or a sports car or anything that screamed wealth. I bought a small, sunlit apartment. I paid off my grandmother's medical debts. I created a trust in her name. And then I erased myself from the narrative. I hid behind shell companies and NDAs and legal layers. Lena helped me build. I didn't want the world to know. I didn't want men to chase me for the wrong reasons. And more than anything, I didn't want to become someone who used money as a weapon. Because I had seen the damage that kind of power inflicted on people like Ethan. Lena Pierce was the only person who knew the whole story. She had been with me since the beginning, long before she became one of the most respected business litigators in the state. We were both tired girls from modest beginnings, clawing our way up in different ways. She was the one who pushed me to take the acquisition deal, the one who drafted every confidentiality clause with precision. And she was the one I called the morning after the Caldwell incident, my voice still trembling with something between anger and heartbreak. She arrived at my apartment with coffee and almond pastries, placing the bag on my table like she already knew I wouldn't have eaten. "Start talking," she said, dropping her purse onto my couch. I told her everything about the prenup, about the way Victoria's smile sliced into me, about Ethan's silence and the tightening in my chest when I realized how deep their control ran. Lena listened without interrupting, her eyes sharpening with each detail. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair, crossed her legs, and exhaled slowly. "A predictable power move," she murmured. "Old money families panic when they don't understand what they're welcoming into their lineage." "I'm not trying to be part of their lineage," I said quietly. "I'm just trying to marry the man I love." Lena tilted her head, examining me in that way she did when she wanted me to hear myself. "Are you sure he's ready to be the man you think he is?" I hesitated. That was answer enough. She reached across the table, resting her hand on mine. "Ava, listen to me. You don't need to fight them. You don't need to explain yourself or prove anything. If they want to test you, fine. Let them. But you hold the cards. Not them." "I don't want to use money as leverage," I whispered. She smiled, soft but knowing. There's a difference between leverage and protection. You're not trying to hurt anyone. You're just refusing to be controlled. And that, my friend, is your right. Her words settled around me like a shield. For the first time since the prenup hit the marble table, I felt something warm inside me, not victory, not anger, but clarity. A quiet reminder that I had built a life on my own terms. A life no one could take from me. Not even a family as powerful as the Caldwells. If they try to touch my dignity, I said, voice steadying, I'll let them destroy themselves with their own assumptions. Lena nodded approvingly. Good. Because the truth has a way of exposing people far better than any argument. I leaned back, exhaling the breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. The storm inside my chest began to ease. I wasn't powerless. I wasn't trapped. I hadn't needed the Caldwell name before, and I certainly didn't need it now. Their world revolved around wealth, legacy, the illusion of control. My world? My world was built on freedom hard-won, fiercely protected, and utterly mine. As the afternoon sun warmed the floor beneath my feet, I felt something settle into place deep within me. A certainty, a strength, a promise to myself. Their world is built on money. Mine is built on choices. And I won't let their fear decide my future. The path ahead was still unclear, but for the first time in days, I felt grounded, steady, calm, and quietly powerful. Silence, I realized, wasn't weakness. It was armor. And I was done letting anyone mistake it for anything less. I spent the next day moving through my apartment as if gravity had doubled, each step heavier than it should have been, each breath thick with the weight of everything unsaid. Lena had left hours earlier with a promise to help however I needed, but the quiet that followed felt impossibly loud. I kept replaying the moment at the Caldwell dining table, the thud of the prenup, the glint in Victoria's eyes, Ethan's trembling fingertips beneath my palm. I needed to talk to him, not about money, not about his parents, but about us, about whether the future we had been building was standing on something real or something already cracking down the center. So, that evening, I texted him a simple message. Can you come over tonight? Just the two of us. We need to talk. He replied almost immediately, of course. I'll be there in 20. I stood at the kitchen counter waiting for him, fingers tracing absent-minded patterns on the cool quartz surface. When I heard his footsteps in the hallway, something small inside me fluttered fear, hope, maybe both. He walked in wearing a soft gray sweater, eyes tired but gentle, as if he already sensed that whatever we were about to discuss could change everything. Ava, he said softly, stepping toward me. You look upset. I'm so sorry about last night. Ethan, I interrupted, my voice steady but quiet. I need to ask you something. And I need you to really answer me. Not for them. Not for me. For you. He swallowed. Okay. Do you believe, I began, choosing each word as if it might shatter in my hands, that this love our love is something worth standing up for? The question hung in the air like smoke. Ethan's eyes flickered, his jaw tightening just barely as though he already knew the right answer but couldn't force himself to say it. He sat down on the sofa and buried his hands into his hair. Ava, The hesitation was worse than any rejection. I don't want to lose you, he finally said. But I don't want to lose them either. The words hit me with a coldness I wasn't prepared for. I lowered myself onto the armchair across from him, letting the distance speak for itself. If you try to hold on to everything, I said softly, you'll lose the one thing that actually mattered. His eyes filled with a desperate kind of pain. Please don't make me choose. I'm not making you choose, I whispered. Life is. He looked away, blinking hard. In the silence that followed, I felt something inside me unravel, a fragile thread snapping in a place too deep to fix with words or promises. I could feel the love between us, still warm, still real, but it was trapped beneath layers of fear inherited from a lifetime of submission. Ethan wasn't choosing his parents over me. He just wasn't choosing anything, and that was somehow worse. After he left, the apartment felt even smaller. I tried reading, cleaning, listening to music, anything to keep my thoughts from circling, but restlessness gnawed at me. Eventually, I curled up on the couch, letting exhaustion pull me into a half-sleep. I woke to the sound of Ethan's voice muffled through the bedroom wall. It took me a second to realize I hadn't imagined it. He had called me earlier, and I must have forgotten to mute my phone. The screen was glowing faintly from the kitchen counter. The call still connected. He must have dialed me by accident. His voice came through clearly now, low and strained. "Mom, please. I don't want to force her to sign anything. I don't want a prenup. I'm not asking for that." My breath hitched. He sounded like the Ethan I fell in love with, the one who dreamed of sunsets and quiet lives and children with my smile. But then came the sharp, chilling tone of Victoria, slicing through the speaker like ice cracking. "Don't be naive, Ethan. Love does not build an empire. Money does. Stability does. If you can't convince her to sign the prenup, then you are not ready for marriage. Do you understand me? I love her," Ethan whispered. "And what I feel, love," Victoria snapped, "does not feed a family. She either signs it or the wedding is off. And if you don't have the spine to make her do it, then maybe you aren't ready to lead anything, not a marriage, not a household, not this family." Silence. Long, suffocating silence. Then Ethan's voice, barely audible. I just don't want to lose either of you." Victoria exhaled sharply, impatient and unimpressed. "Grow up, Ethan. Life isn't about what you want. It's about what must be done." My chest tightened as if a hand were closing around it. I pressed a palm against my sternum, feeling the tremor move through my body. I had always known Victoria wielded power over him, but hearing the way he shrank under her words, hearing the fear in his voice, it was different. It was real. It was heartbreaking. And it was irreversible. He wasn't fighting me. He wasn't defending her. He was drowning, pulled under by a lifetime of expectation, conditioned obedience, and emotional inheritance. And I realized then, with a quiet finality that left me breathless, Ethan was a man torn in half. But he was also a man who would never step out of the shadow that tore him. I ended the accidental call, staring at my reflection in the darkened window. My face looked calm, but inside, something fragile was crumbling. "He loves me," I whispered to the empty room, but not enough to withstand the storm he was born into. And in that simple truth, painful and undeniable, I knew a part of our future had just disappeared like a flame snuffed out in the dark. I barely slept after hearing that phone call. The words kept replaying in my mind, Victoria's cold certainty, Ethan's trembling fear. By morning, the ache in my chest had shifted into something sharper, something clearer. Pain had a way of stripping illusions away, and what remained was a truth I could no longer ignore. I could not rely on Ethan to protect us. I could only rely on myself. So, I called Lena. She arrived within the hour, hair pulled into a sharp bun, tailored blazer still crisp from court that morning. She looked at me for 2 seconds, really looked, and then set her briefcase down with a sigh. "You didn't sleep." "Barely," I whispered. She poured us both coffee from my French press, then slid into the chair across from me. "Tell me." I recounted the entire night, the ask, the hesitation in Ethan's voice, the phone call he never knew I heard. Lena listened with the same posture she used in depositions, still, focused, eyes narrowing just slightly when something mattered. When I finished, she leaned back and exhaled slowly. "Well," she said calmly, "if they want a prenup, they'll get one. But not theirs." Her tone steadied me. I blinked. "What do you mean?" "I mean you're not signing the one they shoved in your face, like a threat." She opened her briefcase and pulled out a blank contract template. "We're drafting your version, one that's fair, mutual, transparent, equal." A slow breath left me. "A mirrored prenup." "Exactly," Lena nodded. "Whatever they want to protect, you protect the same. But we will add clauses that safeguard your rights, your privacy, and the assets you built before Ethan ever came into your life." She paused. "He doesn't get access to Neurocore money. Not now, not ever." I looked down at my hands. "He never asked for it." "I know," Lena said gently. "But his family will, they already have. They just don't know it yet." We spent the next 4 hours at my kitchen table, surrounded by stacks of papers, coffee mugs, and the kind of quiet concentration that comes from necessity. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about pride. It was about dignity, stability, boundaries. The life I built with my own hands deserved protection, especially from people who saw me as nothing more than an accessory to be controlled. The mirrored prenup was simple. Whatever Ethan kept, I kept. Whatever assets they wanted to protect, I mirrored in equal measure. No future claims on each other's companies. No entitlement to growth of premarital businesses. No alimony unless circumstances changed drastically due to illness or accident. Complete financial independence for both parties. No tricks. No traps. Just fairness. By the time we printed the final draft on heavy cream cardstock, the afternoon sun was streaming through my window in warm, steady beams. The paper almost glowed beneath it. Lena handed me the embossed folder, so elegant and understated compared to the gold-rimmed monstrosity Victoria had thrown at me. "Here," she said. "This is your voice. Your terms. Your line in the sand." My fingers brushed over the smooth surface. "If they wanted fairness." I murmured, "This is fairness." Lena's gaze softened. "What do you want to say when you send it?" Something inside me studied like a compass realigning itself. "Just one thing." I drafted the email carefully. No anger, no defensiveness. No cracks for them to pry open. Only clarity. "Victoria, if your family values fairness, I will bring fairness to your table tomorrow." Attached is my version of the agreement. Ava. I didn't mention Ethan. Not yet. The contract wasn't about him, it was about the power they assumed they had over my life. I hit send. And barely 2 hours later, Ethan showed up. He didn't knock softly like he usually did. His knock was urgent, uneven. When I opened the door, his face was flushed, his breathing uneven, and there was a storm in his eyes I had never seen before. "Ava," he said, stepping inside before I could speak. "Why did you send my mother a contract?" I held the folder in my hand, calm in a way that unnerved even me. "Because she gave me one first." "But you," he raked a hand through his hair. "You didn't tell me you were doing this. You didn't talk to me." "I tried," I said quietly. "You didn't want to hear it. That's not fair." I exhaled. "Ethan, all I did was mirror their terms. Everything they want for themselves, I want for us both. Fairness. Equality. Independence." "You're turning this into a war," he said, voice cracking. "No," I replied gently, painfully. "I'm defending myself. There's a difference." He stopped pacing and looked at me, then really looked. And in that moment I saw the boy he once was, caught between wanting to please everyone and failing both sides. His shoulders slumped, his expression crumbling. I didn't want this. Any of this. I wanted us to get married without all this pressure. Without contracts and lawyers. "So did I whispered. Something broke in his eyes. "Why does it feel like you're choosing to fight instead of trust?" My throat tightened. "Because loving you shouldn't mean forfeiting myself." Ethan stepped closer, desperation flickering in his expression. "Please, don't make this the end." I shook my head softly. "It's not me ending it, Ethan. It's the silence you choose every time they ask you to pick a side." He opened his mouth, then closed it. No words. No promises. Just silence, the same silence from the dining room. From every moment he'd bowed his head instead of raising his voice. And it was then that the truth settled inside me, cold and final. He wasn't choosing them over me. He was choosing nothing at all. And nothing cannot hold a marriage. "You're not going to sign my contract, are you?" I asked quietly. He didn't answer. The silence was enough. My heart fractured, but my spine straightened. I lifted my chin, swallowing the ache rising in my throat. "Love without courage," I said softly, "dies long before the relationship does." Tears shimmered in his eyes, but he didn't reach for me. He didn't fight. He simply stood there, suspended between two worlds, unable to move toward either. And that was when I knew. I wasn't losing him. I was letting him go. The next morning, the sky over Pacific Heights looked deceptively calm, blue, open, almost forgiving. I wasn't. I drove toward the Caldwell estate with a stillness inside me I couldn't fully explain. Not anger. Not fear. Something colder. Something clearer. The kind of clarity that comes only after hope has burned itself out. The gates opened automatically as my car approached, metal bars gliding apart with a quiet hiss. It struck me how fitting that was this family's world opened only for those they approved of, and yet today I was walking in to end the last door they ever held over me. I stepped out of the car and walked across the familiar stone path toward the front entrance. The two-story glass facade reflected me back at myself, small against the massive architecture, but standing tall nonetheless. A housekeeper opened the door before I knocked. "They're waiting in the dining room," she whispered, eyes avoiding mine, as if she could sense the storm about to break. Of course they were in the dining room. The same marble table, the same chairs, the same battlefield. Richard and Victoria were already seated, postures stiff with entitlement. Ethan stood behind them, looking as though he'd barely slept. His eyes were red, the skin beneath them bruised by exhaustion, or tears, maybe both. When he saw me, something in his expression flickered with hope. It hurt to see it. Victoria was the first to speak. "So," she said coolly, "you wanted a final discussion?" I pulled out the chair directly across from them, but I didn't sit. "Not yet." "Yes." Richard let out a dry laugh. "Is this about your contract?" He waved a dismissive hand. "Clever trick, but unnecessary. Our legal terms are standard." "Standard," I repeated softly. "Like throwing a prenup in someone's face and expecting obedience." Victoria's lips twitched. "We didn't expect obedience. Just rationality." I nodded slowly. "Thank you for being honest." Her chin lifted, sensing victory where there was none. "Good. Then you'll sign the original agreement." "No," I said simply. The room stilled. Richard leaned forward. "Then what makes you think you have the leverage to negotiate anything with us?" I reached into my bag and set a slim black USB on the marble table. The sound, a soft tap, echoed louder than the prenup ever had. Ethan stiffened instantly. Victoria narrowed her eyes. "What is that?" "Your son," I replied calmly. "Begging you to let him choose love for once in his life." Ethan's breath hitched. "Ava." I held up a hand gently. "I didn't come here to fight you, Ethan. Or to humiliate you. This recording isn't a threat. It's the truth. A truth your parents deserve to hear." I pressed play. Ethan's voice filled the room, trembling, emotional, genuine. "Mom, please. I don't want to force her to sign anything. I love her. I don't want to lose her." Then Victoria's voice, sharp enough to cut granite. "Love does not feed a family. If you can't make her sign, you're not ready for marriage." Silence swallowed the room afterward, heavy, suffocating. Victoria's face went pale before flushing in blotches of red. Richard looked as though someone had slapped him across the face. Ethan closed his eyes, as if hearing his mother's voice again shattered him all over. I finally sat down, folding my hands neatly in front of me. Victoria found her voice first. "You recorded us?" "No," I said softly. "He did. I simply heard the truth." Ethan looked at me like he wished he could disappear. "Ava, I didn't know." "I know you didn't," I interrupted gently. "That's why I'm not angry." His eyes glistened. I reached into my bag once more and placed my mirrored prenup beside the USB, the cream cardstock glowing softly under the chandelier. "I didn't come here to win," I said slowly. "I came to end this with honesty and dignity. If we are to marry, then fairness must apply to both sides. This is my offer." Victoria let out a cold laugh. "Offer? You think you get to make offers to us?" I smiled, calm, controlled. "You still don't know who I am." Richard scoffed. "We know enough." "No," I said, voice steady. "You know nothing." I leaned forward slightly. "I am the founder of Neurocor, the company that sold for $98 million 3 years ago. I've been the majority shareholder of Atlas Tech for the last 18 months. And my personal net worth," I paused, "exceeds your entire family portfolio." Their faces drained of color. I didn't gloat. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Power spoken gently is louder than power screamed. Ethan stared at me, stunned. You never told me." I wanted you to love me without knowing. Without money, distorting the truth. He opened his mouth but found no words. I stood, smoothing the edge of my blazer. If you want this wedding, Ethan, then you and your parents will sign my contract. Not because of what I'm worth, but because fairness matters. And because I refuse to enter a marriage where I am treated like a liability instead of a partner. I looked at him, really looked. If you don't sign, I'll walk away. Without asking for anything, not a cent. Not a property. Nothing. Silence seeped into every corner of the room. Victoria stared at the contract as if it were poison. Richard stared at me as if reassessing every arrogant assumption he'd ever made. Ethan stared at the paper like it was the last bridge between him and the life he wanted. My heart raced, but my voice remained steady. Ethan, I whispered, this is your moment. Choose the man you want to be. His lower lip trembled. Seconds passed, then more. And with each moment he didn't reach for the pen, something inside me began to loosen. Not break, release. Finally, tears spilled down his cheeks. He shook his head weakly. I can't. I closed my eyes. Not in anger. In mourning. It's okay, I whispered. I already knew. I picked up my bag and walked toward the door. Each step felt like reclaiming something I had lost along the way. Behind me, Ethan sobbed quietly. Victoria said nothing. Richard said nothing. No one moved. And I didn't look back. Because sometimes the most powerful sound in the world is the silence of someone choosing themselves at last. The world didn't end the moment I walked out of the Caldwell estate, but it certainly felt like something enormous had shifted, like a fault line deep beneath the surface had finally snapped. When I closed my car door and started the engine, my hands shook so violently I had to grip the steering wheel with both palms just to steady myself. I drove without knowing where I was going, without hearing the music playing through the speakers, without feeling the soft vibration of the road beneath the tires. My body was moving, but my mind was hollow. Empty, like someone had scooped out everything inside me and left only the shell. I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I didn't replay the moment Ethan said he couldn't sign. There was nothing left to analyze. Nothing left to salvage. Love, when it dies, doesn't announce itself with fireworks or thunder. It slips quietly out of the room the moment someone looks at you and chooses fear instead. By the time I reached my apartment, my phone had already begun buzzing once, twice, then relentlessly. But I couldn't look at it. Not yet, not tonight. I dropped my keys on the table and let my back slide down the door until I was sitting on the floor, head resting against the wood, staring at the faint crack in the ceiling I had never noticed before. Everything felt unreal, too still. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that follows a devastating storm. The next morning, the world was no longer quiet. It started with a single headline notification on my phone. Tech entrepreneur Ava Monroe ends engagement to Caldwell heir days before wedding. Then another. Rumors swirl around prenup dispute between Monroe and Caldwell family. Then hundreds. By noon, the story had spread across California, then across the country. Videos. Tweets. Think pieces. Speculation. Every news anchor wanted a piece of the narrative. My favorite was from a business news channel. Local Cinderella walks away from millionaire family, but she was the one with the kingdom. It would have been funny if it weren't so painfully accurate. By evening, public opinion had found a villain, and it wasn't me. Hashtags began trending. Number, marriage is not merger. Number, stand with Ava. Number, cancel the Caldwells. Thousands of comments flooded in. Good for her. Money doesn't buy respect. Imagine trying to bully a woman who built her own empire. Victoria Caldwell is the reason therapy exists. And the worst for them, they tried to trap her with a prenup. Old money is terrified of real power. Contre na Caldwell hung banco nai molgak. People were gleefully picking apart the Caldwell family's history, business deals, rumors, alliances, tax loopholes, even questionable charity donations. Their public image, once so meticulously cultivated, began to unravel thread by thread. But I hadn't said a word to anyone. I didn't need to. Truth has a way of slipping through cracks, especially in houses built entirely on illusion. My phone rang non-stop. Ethan called. Then called again. Then 12 more times. Eventually, the notification screen was filled with his name. One missed call after another, like a pattern of desperation. I didn't answer. I couldn't. What could he possibly say? What apology could overcome years of fear? What promise could erase the silence he chose in the moment that mattered most? In the afternoon, Lena came over with groceries and a blender, declaring she was making smoothies because I looked like death warmed over. She handed me one and sat beside me on the couch, turning on the TV. Every channel was discussing the story. One reporter said, "Sources claim the Caldwell parents pressured Monroe into signing a one-sided prenup." She declined and walked away. Another added, "This isn't about money, it's about power." Lena nudged me gently. "You didn't do anything wrong." "I know," I whispered. And I meant it. But knowing didn't make the ache disappear. Meanwhile, the fallout for the Caldwell empire intensified. Their company's stock dropped 9% by noon, then 14% by the end of the trading day. Investors panicked, questioning leadership, ethics, the future of the firm. Every financial analyst panel said the same thing. The Caldwell brand has become unstable. Victoria released a statement insisting this was a private family matter, which only made people angrier. Richard tried to give a confident interview, but the tremor in his voice betrayed him. Even Ethan, who had never asked for any of this, couldn't escape the public eye. Photos of him leaving his office, disheveled and drained, appeared online with captions like, "Man who lost CEO fiancé after prenup scandal." It was cruel. And I felt a pang of guilt, but not enough to reach out, because deep down, beneath the empathy, was a truth so sharp it almost glowed. I didn't ruin them. They ruined themselves the moment they tried to buy and bully love. That night, I stood on my balcony, the city lights shimmering below me. The cool air brushed against my skin, grounding me in a way I desperately needed. I wrapped my arms around myself and let the silence settle. For the first time in days, my mind was still. I whispered into the quiet, I didn't need revenge. They collapsed under the weight of their own arrogance. And for the first time since it all began, I felt the faintest sense of peace. Not victory. Not triumph. Just release. 5 years is a long time. Long enough for wounds to scar over, for echoes to fade, for entire lives to be rebuilt from foundations that once felt shattered. The world I lived in after the Caldwell storm didn't look anything like the one I had walked away from. It was quieter. Stronger. Mine. Atlas Tech, my company, my second great creation after NeuroCore had grown from a modest AI logistics startup into a multinational powerhouse. Hundreds of employees. Offices in 6 states. A valuation that soared past $400 million in the most recent funding round. Investors flew across the country just to meet me. Universities invited me to speak. Venture firms tried to recruit me as a partner. My name, once deliberately hidden, now appeared regularly in tech magazines, leadership articles, women in business panels, and Forbes lists. Success didn't feel like revenge. It didn't even feel like triumph. It simply felt earned. I built a life I didn't have to explain, justify, or shrink myself for. A life where silence was no longer armor, but peace. Some Friday evenings, I would stand in the Atlas Tech headquarters in Austin, glass walls glowing gold under the setting sun, and look down at the bustling city with a quiet gratitude that still surprised me. I wasn't married. I didn't have children yet, but I had built something lasting. Something resilient, something entirely on my terms. And for the first time in my life, that was enough. But there were days rare, fleeting, when a memory would drift in like dust through an open window, a soft laugh. A sunrise drive down Highway 1. The warmth of a hand intertwined with mine. Ethan's hand, and for a heartbeat, I would wonder who he became after his world collapsed. I didn't have to wonder long. One afternoon, while reviewing quarterly reports in my private office, my assistant knocked on the door holding a stack of mail. "These came for you, Ava." Most are invitations, but this one looked personal. She handed me a pale blue envelope with handwriting I recognized before even reading the return address. Ethan Caldwell, Phoenix, Arizona. I didn't open it immediately. I placed it gently on my desk, finished my meeting notes, answered 2 more emails, and only then, when the room was quiet and the sun had dipped low enough to cast long shadows, I broke the seal. His handwriting hadn't changed. Still neat, still slightly slanted, still carrying traces of the boy who once wrote poetry on napkins during late-night coffee dates. The letter was long. Longer than I expected. I read it slowly, heart steady, breath even. Ava, I don't know if I have the right to write you. I don't know if this will even reach you. But I need you to hear something I wish I had understood years ago. I didn't lose you because of my mother. I didn't lose you because of the prenup. I lost you because I was too afraid to choose the life I wanted instead of the life I was trained to obey. You didn't walk away from me, Ava. I let you fall alone. And I'm sorry. I have never stopped being sorry. I'm in Arizona now. A small compliance firm. Quiet work. Humble. I think you would have liked the simplicity of it. I'm trying to rebuild things the right way this time. I'm not asking for you back. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just needed you to know that I finally see the truth you saw long before I did. You were the bravest person in the room that day. I wasn't, and I live with that every day. Ethan. I sat there for a long moment, the letter trembling slightly in my hands. Grief didn't wash over me. Nor nostalgia. Nor regret. Just a deep, quiet understanding. He had grown up. He had learned something hard, something necessary. And yet, the distance between us was a chasm no apology could bridge. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in the top drawer of my desk, beneath a few photographs and a silver pen. I didn't throw it away. But I didn't reply. A week later, I asked a former Caldwell employee now working at a VC firm that partnered with Atlas Tech about him. Not because I planned to reach out, but because I needed closure of a different kind. Ethan, he said, sipping his coffee. Yeah, his life quieted down a lot after the scandal. He moved to Arizona to escape the media. He lives alone, goes to work, volunteers at a dog rescue on weekends. Nice guy. But he's different now. Softer. Sadder. Is he married? I asked. The man shook his head. Never dated seriously again, from what I've heard. Said he already lost the woman he was supposed to build a life with. My chest tightened not with longing, but with something gentler, a tender ache for the boy he once was. A boy who had loved me honestly, even if fear had drowned that love before it could grow roots. That night, after everyone had left the office, I stood by the window overlooking downtown Austin. The city lights shimmered below like scattered fireflies. I pressed my palm against the cool glass and let my reflection waver in the dark. He wasn't cruel, I whispered to myself. He was just weak. Weakness isn't evil, it isn't malicious. But it is dangerous. Weakness can end relationships just as thoroughly as betrayal. Weakness can kill love just as effectively as lies. And sometimes, it leaves a deeper scar because you can't hate someone who didn't mean to hurt you. You can only mourn what they never had the strength to hold. I closed my eyes, inhaling deeply. Some people are good. But goodness without courage cannot keep a heart. I pulled the window shade down and turned off the lights, my footsteps echoing softly as I walked away not from the past, but into a future I had finally built with my own hands. A future where I could breathe fully, stand fully, love fully when the time came. For now, peace was enough. And that was something Ethan, for all his regret, had never been able to give me. It happened on a late autumn afternoon, the kind of day when the sun drapes the Texas fields in warm gold and the breeze carries the scent of cedar and hay. I was working from home, reviewing a partnership proposal for Atlas Tech's expansion into renewable logistics, when my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. I normally ignored calls I didn't recognize, but something intuition maybe made me answer. Hello? For a moment, there was only static. Then a voice I hadn't heard in years surfaced, fragile yet unmistakable. Ava, it's Victoria Caldwell. I froze, my hand tightening around the phone. Her tone didn't carry the icy sharpness I remembered. No superiority. No velvet-wrapped command. Just age. Exhaustion. And something else I never thought I'd hear from her. Defeat. I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from, she began, her voice trembling ever so slightly. But I had to call. I sat down slowly, the wooden chair creaking beneath me. Why? There was a long pause, and then she exhaled shakily. We lost almost everything after that year. The company, the investors, the reputation we spent decades building. It had all slipped away. Her words cracked like thin ice. And Ethan, he hasn't been the same since you left. My throat tightened, not with pain, but with a distant sadness like hearing news about someone you once knew in another lifetime. She continued. He still talks about you. He still wonders if things could have been different. He never blamed you, Ava. Not once. I closed my eyes, letting her words settle. I didn't call to guilt you, she whispered. I called because I thought you should know he never stopped loving you. And because I needed to say I'm sorry. The apology hung in the air, unfamiliar, delicate, and unexpectedly genuine. I wasn't sure if it cost her everything, or if it came too late to matter, perhaps both. I inhaled slowly. Victoria. I never hated Ethan. She didn't respond, but I could feel her listening, truly listening for the first time. I never hated you either, I added softly, and I meant it. Hatred requires energy, emotion, attachment. I had let all of that go years before. I only ever felt sad. For him. For what fear took from him. On the other end, a faint sob broke through, quickly muffled. It was strange hearing such vulnerability from a woman who once ran her world with iron and crystal. Ava, she whispered, he always said you were the one thing in his life that felt real. My eyes drifted to the wide Texas window, sunlight spilling across the open fields like a blessing. Calm washed through me deep, quiet, undeniable. I'm glad he loved me, I said. I loved him too. Then why? She stopped herself, breath trembling. Why didn't you ever try again? I smiled, the kind of small, sad smile that comes from knowing a truth too heavy to hold with bitterness. Because love is not just about feeling. I said softly. It's about choosing. Fighting. Protecting. I hesitated, choosing my words gently. And he wasn't strong enough to keep the best thing in his life. The silence that followed wasn't tense. It wasn't angry. It was understanding. Recognition. Acceptance. Finally, Victoria spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. I see that now. There was nothing left to say after that. Not really. Some stories aren't meant to be rewritten, some endings aren't meant to be undone. They simply become the quiet truth we carry forward. Take care of yourself, Victoria. I said softly, and before she could respond, I ended the call. I set the phone down, feeling no anger, no triumph, no ache, just a wide, steady peace spreading through my chest. Like exhaling after holding your breath for years. I walked to the window and pushed it open. The Texas sun warmed my skin, the golden fields rolling endlessly toward the horizon. A few horses grazed near the fence line, tails flicking lazily. The world felt full, expansive, gently humming with life. My reflection ghosted against the glass, older, wiser, softer around the edges. The girl who once walked into the Caldwell estate trembling had long since grown into a woman who no longer needed anyone else's validation. I never needed to win, I whispered to the wind. I just needed to let go. Inside my chest, the last fragments of bitterness dissolved completely. Love doesn't need someone to triumph. It only needs someone brave enough to hold it. And Ethan, for all his goodness, had never learned how. I closed the window and let the sunlight wash over me, warm and quiet and entirely mine.